Hi there. Thanks for joining us. Hey, Eric. Good to have you here. So we have a series of questions. I think several people have probably looked at some of these already, so they have an idea as to the flow of how this goes. So I'm just going to jump right in with, first and foremost, let's give a little background and introduction about Eric. So let's start with number one. How long have you been doing HR?
Fairly new, since about 1987. So, yeah, pretty new at this thing. I'm
Just a couple of years.
I'm hopeful that it'll work out for me in a few years. Yeah, yeah.
There you go. There you go. Maybe make a career out of it or something. That would
It's an
work.
idea. There we go.
I like it. I like it. So why HR? What made you want to go for the HR realm of things?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was not just an initial interest. I mean, it's a profession to me that is not one that, you think about, okay, firefighter, police officer, business executive, things of that nature. So the way that I came into it was initially I thought I wanted to be a psychologist. And I thought that was kind of a cool thing. And my whole thought process was that you'd take psychology and then you'd counsel people and then you would take them from problem with this administered solution and they would be fixed. When I learned from almost the beginning that that wasn't how it worked, then it kind of made me disconcerted, because I liked the idea of having a problem to outcome with cleanup resolution. So I thought maybe get into business and stuff, and this kind of was a good alignment. Little did I realize that in HR, when you have the problem and you administer a solution, it doesn't always have the right outcome then either, but at least, I mean, we try. So
Yeah.
that was kind of my path to HR, was initially going the humanistic route and then the business application thereafter. Yeah.
Good. So why do you stay? What gets you jazzed about, yay, I've been doing HR since 87?
I think that for me, it is the interaction with people. And I want to be careful with that because I think that is one of the worst things that HR people can say sometimes. Why are you in HR? It's because I like people. I'm not saying it's not okay to like people, but that isn't our purpose. In and of itself, we have to have a purpose. And what I find, the most exciting is when you find challenges and you figure out a way to make it as close to win-win as possible, for the individuals, the organization. And oftentimes there's some give and take, but if in fact both parties feel like it's generally the best outcome, or at least a better outcome, then I feel like I've won, we've won, and everything. And I don't know of many professions that allow for that degree of engagement toward a mutual positive outcome. So that's kind of what I enjoy. And I do enjoy just interacting with people and finding out, new things, new information, creative ways to deal with things, not always approaching the challenges in the same way, but being able to kind of learn and continue to grow yourself with the way that you do things as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are certainly enough opportunities in HR, and we keep bringing new humans into the mix, and while other humans are leaving, so that ever-changing environment, but I don't think that's going to change. We'll always have that. When I was talking with Rebecca, we talked about the fact that there's not a chatbot for that. There's no AI. It still takes humans dealing with humans in a human way to actually make these things, that win-win proposition that you're talking about. So what types of organizations have you worked for before you came to HR Answers?
Yeah, so, I think, again, in this profession, probably more than most, I think a varied background is of great value, because especially when you're in a consultancy role, because you're dealing with a broad array of client organizations such as HR Answers has, because we do have such a broad array. I mean, some of the foundational work that I did that I think is of at least as much value as my education and going for my master's degree and everything like that was working on an English pig and sheep farm, working in grain farm work and such, because you really learn what real work is. And, you know, the expectation of doing it no matter what, things of that nature, and working food service, you know, working in the fryers at Kentucky Fried Chicken, doing the customer service components over at Chuck E. Cheese, you know, working as a pool table installer and a salesperson at a pool distribution place. You know, and then, you know, we start all of those foundationally, I think, help, because when people say you just don't understand, you haven't lived it, you know, and you come, there's something to be said for not telling people, oh yeah, I know, but rather being able to articulate in a way that you do understand. And I think that that's now maybe a pig and sheep farmer, you know, worker and hauling hay in South Dakota might not seem sufficient. So yeah, I did also do private investigation work and legal investigation work. So working in a law firm, getting all sorts of briefs together for the attorneys and things, you know, helped me in my process and analytical component. Private investigation work, yes, I got to follow in marital disputes, things of that nature, but also did some corporate buyout work where I did some undercover work associated with that. So seeing that side of things was very valuable. And then when I got into HR itself, I was able to start an HR department in organizations that grew dramatically in multi-state operations and such. So that all of these things helped. Then I did some consulting on my own for a while, and then you were kind enough to allow me to join HR Answers in 2021 and have been having a great time here since. Yeah.
I think that's more like you were kind enough to accept. It's a two-way street. So here at HR Answers, you mentioned already that we have a varied client base. What types of clients do you work with now?
Yeah. In all seriousness, one of the neatest things is the variety of clients. And so we've got a deep governmental depth of organizations. We also have a lot of private organization. We have nonprofits. So, you know, you kind of have the spectrum of individual organizations out there. In addition to that, you have size. I mean, you know, the nice thing with an organization like this is that we are engaging with a company that has 2 or 3 employees, and an individual has those HR functional roles, and they just are, you know, have no idea what they need to do. But yet some of those things that the big companies have to deal with, those small ones have to do as well. So we have a broad array of organizations across the spectrum of the types of businesses and the personalities associated with it. And again, for me, the passion in consulting and such is being able to meet people where they are at and to try to discern what their outcomes really are and try to align their objectives with appropriate practices to achieve those. So some organizations are very into, we only want to meet the minimum standards associated with what's required, what we're required to do. Others want to be the employer of choice with regard to their creative benefits and the way they deal with things. And both are right, and both can be the best way, because, you know, and so the nice thing is when you've worked in the organization like ours for a while, you start getting repeat customers. And you start getting to know some of the nuances and the real motivation that individuals may have or organizations may have. But then in the same breath, it's kind of neat to go and try to figure out as quickly as you can so that you can get the best advice. So broad array of clients with a broad array of motivations and goals and objectives. And yeah, so we've got a lot of different ones out here.
Yeah, you know, when speaking with Rebecca, she reminded me that we have a mosquito district. And now for those of you who are watching this, you should Google what is a mosquito district, and I'll just leave it at that. We'll let them do some little trivia hunt on their own. I was like, oh, that's right, we do have a mosquito district. So yeah, who knew that's what your future career would hold, working with a mosquito district. So you've been doing this for a while. You've had a lot of variation of different organizations, not only in your HR role, but also as a worker, just to start understanding what's going on. So out of all of that stuff, What's your passion? What's the thing that you want to grab a hold of and work with?
Well, first off, I'm just tempted too much to show my somewhat comedic side, and I'm going to say, oh, yeah. Obviously, we needed the mosquito district here at that moment. See, that was me. So anyway,
You're giving them hints as to what it is.
you know, the catchphrase that because when you asked, what is our motivation and our passion, and I think that while it may not be a glitzy, glamorous title, I think organizational alignment really is kind of my passion. And that is, again, kind of going back to, if an organization wants to go in a given direction, and aligning the people you bring on board to be the type that fit well there, to make your benefits and your structure in such a way that individuals work well in that type of environment, and they stay on board and things. That's terrific. There's a coolness to that in my mind. So, I think that oftentimes, and we come into our profession, we come into, our day-to-day dealings with preconceived notions about the right way to do things. And I have those preconceived notions. I am not trying to say otherwise. The difference for me is I consider myself a pretty empathetic individual. And I try to ascertain and look through another person's eyes, look through the organization's eyes, and try to really figure out how best to achieve that alignment. Okay. So, I think that for me is, the important thing. We are not a, I could get in some fights with some HR people out there about this, but we are not a social welfare function within an organization. We have a purpose that is of more meaning, and we need to help align our workforce, align everything so that the organization succeeds and the employees succeed as well. We do not need to be strong arming employees, treating them like minions, but but we also are not there just to be kind to them either. So organizational alignment. Okay.
Yeah. No, I like it. I think when I worked in state service, we called that having a line of sight. Really, what is the connection of all of this stuff? It gave people a sense of belonging and future planning capabilities, which was pretty cool for them. So on that particular topic, what do you think the main considerations are that HR professionals should keep in mind?
Okay. I think the overarching thing, first and foremost, is, we always need to comply with what the law mandates. I think that, it is critical to, our profession, ethical standards, and just appropriate behavior to comply with the law. Now, that does not mean that we try to be incredibly aggressive in being, aligning. We look for the I's that are dotted and not. We look for the T's that are crossed and not. And we help to, get as close to it as appropriate, but not as some ethical violation, but rather, we become knowledgeable enough about it to understand how is best to do it. But we still follow the law, Again, not glitzy and glamorous, but policies. I know that a lot of people get really hung up on, we should just, we're dealing with adults, that why do we need these strict policies and clarity in policies? Because, they'll behave like adults. Well, sometimes even adults behave like children. And sometimes Lori just raised her hand. If it did, there you go. So, having the policies in place allows for that alignment, everybody understanding what the rules are, putting up bumpers on a, I'm not a good bowler, as an example, and bumpers are probably a good way for me to bowl because it's the only way that I'm going to hit the pins sometimes. So having the policies in effect, and I portray or present to clients and even my own mindset, that policies are really your internal laws. That's the way you should be treating them, because you are not going to be able to effectively administer the policies of the organization, the laws of the organization with your employees if you're inconsistent and you don't follow them yourselves, because how then can you expect that from the employees? So I think that that's a critical alignment component. Beyond that, we still have procedures, the things that are kind of the how-tos internal to the policies. They may have some flexibility, but those are things that are a good thing to have, so that you have that same process followed all the time, except when it doesn't, but then you document why, and then past practice, which is the bane of so many situations out there. If in fact you follow the law, you follow your policies, your past practices, but really there was some, procedures, but there's some past practices where you've violated those or did some things wrong. They're going to be a tail you're going to have to pull along forever. So you need to be aware of that. And that's where, again, if you have foibles, if you have issues out there, I encourage organizations to consider a reset opportunity. So when you've created new policy, handbook, things of that nature, you go and tell people, this was the past, this is the future. We're going to be striving to do better in the future. So that kind of gets rid of some of that past practice thing. Also, a couple more things before you ask the next question. I think that, whenever and whatever we can do to move the subjective to the objective is a huge value. And again, policies, procedures kind of help that. But the reason for that is, if in fact you can point to something, why did you do that? This is why. I don't understand the process that you did. This is the process we follow. If we do that consistently over and over, then people may not be happy with it all the time, but at least we can articulate it in a way that is less painful to individuals, because everybody can go and complain about it in the same fashion. When we get into that subjective thing, which a lot of organizations, especially the ones that are on that spectrum toward, we want to be really nice to our employees, we want to be flexible and all that, you've got to be flexible to everybody out there. And another phrase that I use with some client engagements, I'll go and say, when you're going to be kind to your employees in this subjective fashion, I want you to think in terms of being kind in your worst employee, and then by those same metrics, that same standard to your best. So don't just be subjective based on the other. And the last thing that I'm going to throw out there for things that I think are really critical is change management. I am not a believer in change for change's sake. I understand things happen, but just saying deal with constant change and all that, our human existence does not just by its very nature deal with change in that way. So we need to be cognizant of the fact that there is a past state, a current state, and a future state, and people are being taken through that at different speeds. There's more loss, there's less loss to certain individuals. So whenever you think about, well, let's do this, or your senior management says, let's change from here to here, always think in terms of the plan for everybody to be brought along, because then you're going to drop off fewer of them on the way. Back to you.
Well, I'm actually going to ask you an additional question about your past, current, and future. Do you ever find that organizations have either individuals or entire groups of people that have to replay some of those steps of change before they actually get to the future? So
absolutely,
you moved us to current, and I wasn't there, so I kind of slide back over to my past. Do you see that happening?
Yeah, when some of my background is human resource information systems and technology. I mean, I've got some deep experience in that. And when you go through change management processes, as you've described there, one of the challenges is you have a current state and you're wanting to get to the future state. Well, people become dysfunctional during that change period of time. And oftentimes organizations decide, oh, if it's failing because they've identified a problem that they're trying to improve, and these issues continue and it gets worse and worse, so they want to change it again. You know what happens? There's where that repeated cycle kicks in worse, Because now not only are they trying to go and figure out how to go and change to the first change, now the rules have changed again. And so that doesn't give any degree of stability. So you really want to take ownership of the positive and negative consequences associated with any change effort. If you're going from a current state to a future state, you better be certain that that's what you want to do. And, you know, not everyone believes that, but I do. And you want to have ownership of that and lead everybody through it with the understand there will be dysfunctional behavior between one state and the other, because you are right. Some people are going to go, I'm ready for that future state, and they've bought in. Other ones, they're losing more potentially. And so they need to have some, so thank you. That's, I absolutely agree with you on that.
Stay the course, just, you got to get there. But, you know, I think without most people understanding it, that's why everybody experienced, and trauma might be a strong word, but associated with the pandemic to some extent, because the constant change upon change upon change left people with that instability. I think that's a great word for it, and certainly affected some people more than other people, but that's it. I mean, we got a lot of people behaving badly during the pandemic process, and some of that was there's some life needs that are being interrupted that they can no longer count on, that they're uncertain about. Of course they're going to have behaviors associated with that. We asked them to change, and before they actually got there, we changed it again. So, and I say we, I don't know why I say we, the people that make choices. You know, but it was hard. That was hard stuff to keep up with. But I think that was something everybody experienced, and is exactly what you're talking about.
I absolutely agree with you. Absolutely.
Okay, so tools. What kind of tools are out there to help individuals navigate organizational alignment?
Again, that non-glitzy thing, employee handbooks and policies. I think that, you know, that there is value to that, because people, both on the management side and the employee side, everybody gets to look at the same rule book. You know, if you're playing a game, you know, you may have referees, and maybe that's the HR department at times, you know, but you've got, and, you know, maybe they're not two teams playing against each other, but it's still an idea of having the rules out there so that everybody kind of deals with it. And I'm not saying it has to be a CBA, you know, I'm where it has to be something that strict and everything. There can be subjectivity and there can be flexibility, but build it into the policies, you know, and all those things. In today's world, especially, you know, when you're out looking for a job, I'm not right now. If you're out looking for a job, you know, used to, you would have a resume you'd print up, you'd have a cover letter, maybe you print up, and then you would send it out. In today's world with, you know, technology, you can customize that resume to each job. You can customize a letter much quicker and easier than you used to be able to. Handbooks are the same way. Used to, you would take an employee handbook and you would take it to, you would develop it, you'd send it to the printer, you'd send it out to everybody and all that. In today's electronic world, you know, there's no reason for you not to make it a little more dynamic. Take the time to do hard work up front. And then when things need to change, you don't need to put it off for 6 months, a year to do it. Keep it up to date if it's out there on the, so that would be one thing. Also, again, my bias toward technology and human resource information systems, I think, are extremely valuable to align your organization, because you oftentimes can't really see. Now, if you've got 3 people in your organization, you probably have a pretty good handle on what's happening. But even when you get to 10, even when you get to 15, even you get 20 or whatever, you know aspects about individuals and how they're performing. But if you can get more of that information reported in a consistent fashion with longitudinal data points to say, again, past state, current state, future state, you can start seeing trends. You can see if things are improving, if things are going poorly. And that is something that data through human resource information systems can be very valuable for. When you utilize that kind of thing, and I want to make sure I don't get ahead, I may be jumping ahead on this.
It's okay.
With human resource information systems, especially, and any kind of data acquisition, similar to the change management thing that you discussed, what we discussed a little bit more, you have to remember that when you go out and you acquire or you decide to use a human resource information system, even if you're creating spreadsheets and doing it that way, we love spreadsheets, but I prefer a database type of a tool for this kind of thing. You're going to have to collect data for a period of time before you can really have use of the data, because it's not that what did we do today that's of greatest value with data points. It is what have you done over time so that you can see if it's trending up or down, see whether it's a really good idea that we're doing and what needs to be addressed and stuff. So don't expect that the day that you acquire or the day you put something in effect, it's going to be this miracle to the organization. It's going to take time and it's expensive. So you want to make sure that you plan accordingly and stay the course, because it's going to be a while before it's of greatest value. And then you can really look toward alignment, with that. Yeah.
Good, good. So missteps. You've been doing this for a while. You've seen this before. Where do people usually fall down in the process?
I think that, it's probably going to be more of a recap in some of these things. I think organizations that want to be as employee friendly as possible err toward the subjective and just kind of let it go. And yet they're the ones that oftentimes are most aggressive about certain things that are just kind of out of the norm, but not necessarily to a third party external would be out of the norm, and they want to take aggressive stance against those individuals. So I think thinking that just letting things go is always the right way to make people feel more comfortable is not always the case. I think also the expectation of change efforts resulting in immediate improvement. We all want things to be, improved. That's why we do this whole HR thing. And a quote that I have here that I like is, if our goal is to improve something, if you can't measure it, you can't understand it. If you don't understand it, you can't control it. And if you can't control it, you can't improve it. And that's where things like human resource information systems or ongoing tracking, you start measuring things, you start understanding then as you start seeing that information. Then you can start looking to control it. And then maybe you can improve it. But you can't skip steps, because you start making changes thinking that you're improving it, but you don't really understand what the real hot buttons are, the switches are to make those. So it's important to go that route. So I think a lot of organizations say, we need to do that. We need this outcome. Let's do it. How do we do it? And we don't have the information yet to really make those decisions. So we do things blindly and maybe make missteps associated with that. So those are things that I think are pretty critical.
Sure.
Foibles, flaws.
Yes. Well, and one of the things, and I think it's been a pretty common theme throughout a number of these interviews, has been communication. You've got to tell people that stuff. We know that this is broken and this is why. These are the things we think will help with that. And that's why we're doing this. Our goal is to make this improvement, and we will know by being able to measure these things. But if you don't tell people that that's what it is, they're going, why are we doing this? Did I do something wrong? And it's like, and it's rarely the humans that are truly the issue. It's a group of haphazard things that are happening that when viewed that way, we go, oh, now we know, and we need to fix this. And we want the humans to come along with us, right? So communication seems to be a big deal.
There you go. Absolutely.
And in terms people can understand. That's the other one, because especially in our HR space, we can geek out with some language, with some alphabet soup as far as laws and regulations and what have you. When it gets down to it, what are we trying to accomplish and why?
There was one today in the meeting that we were at that the acronym I wasn't familiar, and unfortunately it was cited, so I didn't have to go and raise my hand acknowledging my lack of recollection of that. So even, yeah, I hear you on that.
It absolutely happens. Yeah. Okay. So this is one of my favorite questions. your best success story.
Mhm. Well, see, I hate this because this is more like, a job interview and stuff. You know, uh,
You already got
I
the job and we're going to keep you, Eric.
thank you. I think my success stories, would, and I think when we did this before, because for those who don't appreciate this, this is the second time I've had the opportunity of doing this interview because the the system didn't work the first time, and
They
I didn't
didn't
have to
record
do.
our voices, but there's a lovely video of just us doing something.
Yeah. So I think that, it's not going to be a one specific thing. It is a process component that I think I have seen repeatedly be of great value and in successful selection and implementations of solutions. And I think that the important thing, and this comes back to alignment, it really does. Ensure that you're getting all interested parties involved in the process of analysis. Because too frequently, HR tries to require or browbeat organizations as to why something needs to be in place or whatever. And I think that the success that I've seen is when, in fact, you ensure that your processes, your selection, your efforts include members of the senior management team, the core HR data users, the accounting function, because payroll is so intertwined with HR related issues, as well as your information systems people, because that happens to be a bias for me too. But you get these individuals all involved in the problem identification, as well as determining what the successful outcome is. And by doing that, instead of having to bring people along selling the problem, selling the solution, you have advocates in each of those groups that can go back to those individuals and talk in terms of senior management as to the relevance, information systems as to the relevance, and what went through the process to get it there. Payroll accounting. Payroll and HR is a great example of, where we oftentimes work together in some ways, and it is dysfunctional because they are such different animals. And so it's beneficial, even though you may think they should just be able to understand each other. That is one that really is helpful to have somebody. I realize that I don't like the way that HR wants to do this, but we looked at all the paths and this is the best that's out there. Having people advocate in that. So I think, bringing people along with the problem and the solution identification in anything. Same thing with our HR engagements with clients that we deal with, helping them to come to the resolution so that they call up and they may actually be trying to get a different answer out of you. And you can tell that, but you lead them through, well, if you do that, how is that going to work out for you? And then all of a sudden, oh, well, I guess I'm not going to do that. If people can take ownership in it. And so, I think that, those are my successes. It's when you turn an individual, especially one, where that could be confrontational, and turn them around to an advocate, or at least closer to the win-win that we described early in the interview, I believe.
Yep. So we talk about, I'm gonna change topics over to some skills and such. So we here at HR Answers talk about professional practice, and we also talk about essential skills. Some people probably think of essential skills like soft skills. So in this area of work, what kind of soft skills or essential skills does a professional need to have to navigate this well?
We are not social workers inside of organizations. We need to have the business acumen. We need to be able to understand the organization that we are working in and be able to align our understanding of how to utilize human resources to best achieve the objectives of the organization. That is our primary purpose. We are not there just to go and be a social welfare worker. We're not meant to be, we're not, it doesn't mean that we don't advocate on behalf of employee issues. The way I always describe it to employees when I've been in company is I'm a 51% company and 49% employee person. You have come to me to talk to me in my role as a member of this organization. Just realize that, I'm going, if there's that cusp, I am going to be on the business side because that is important. Having that intent, and that's another component here, I've raised my kids in an effort and a philosophy that I believe is core to me. Integrity, respect are the two, pillars for the way that I try to live my life. Now, sometimes I'm a little whimsical, so that people may think of it as disrespectful, but I swear that thank you. And then consistency. So again, when people come through your door, as an HR worker, coming back to that component of the 51%, 49%, unfortunately, you can't turn things off from your role as much as some organization functions can. A marketing person, and I'm not putting down or making, but can go and be a little off the cuff and, and not necessarily be marketing all the time. But when you're representing the company and you are, and I'm not trying to be religious here or anything, but a white collar worker, when I'm talking about some kind of a Roman collar or some other religious person, you are held to a higher standard because you are going to be in a role that is going to be judging other people's behaviors. And so, I think that you have to understand when you sign on board for this role, this function, the HR function, you have to understand that there are higher expectations, and little things that could be foibles for somebody else could be more detrimental as a result of you because of your career, but even not to the point of a career issue, just the ability for you to be able to be seen in an effective fashion by all the employees because they will have seen an inconsistency. And so when you verbalize certain things and it doesn't equate to what they've seen, you're going to be less effective there. So, and the other thing I would say is, we want to be more efficient. We want to do things better. We need to first identify effectiveness, and so we need, and that goes back to, kind of making it really understanding the problems and such, because you can be more efficient and do things over and over. But if you're doing the wrong thing over and over consistently, it's not going to help you or the organization. So those are things that I think are kind of important core components. And I hope that met your questions need. So, yeah.
So are there tips or tricks that you can think of that you would share with people? I mean, you've shared a few already. There's some kind of pillars of how you go about this kind of alignment. There are things that you can do for yourselves, the handbooks, the policies, the consistency in the practice, all of that. Are there others?
Yeah, I think I've really probably went out of sequence on some of this because, I think that, I think the reality is we come back to the integrity, respect, consistency, I think are really important. And then something I didn't bring up this time that I did in the previous one is the importance of documentation. And, I can't believe that didn't, because I think that, you do the right thing consistently, but when you're looking at, in the state of Oregon as an example, now the law says individuals can come back 5 years out or regarding certain issues and such. How the heck? I mean, I sometimes forget what I had for not breakfast. I'm consistent on that. Lunch 3 days ago, and so think about 5 years ago, what's occurred and such. So I think documentation is really critical. If you have integrity, consistency, that helps, because when somebody asks you, would you ever do that? And if you are really comfortable with that you're consistent and you're into, you can either say, I don't know if it'd be true, but if you know that you would never do that, you can say that. But having the documentation is helpful along those lines. So I think, again, I think the real bottom line is as an HR professional or a person who is practicing in HR for a member organization or something out there, you know, integrity, respect, and consistency with documentation as the icing on the cake. And you're probably going to be a lot better off in aligning things and people kind of believing that you're there for them in that respect too.
Okay. So one last question, and you don't have to stick with organizational alignment. You've been doing HR for a long time.
Mhm.
What is the one piece of advice that you would share with other HR professionals? And yes, it has to only be one.
The one I was meant to do with the integrity, respect. Now I've went and messed it all up again. You know, I
That's
think
two. You gotta pick one.
Oh, one. Okay. One thing to share. Okay. No, I think that actually something different. And I think you'd appreciate this more. Constant self-education, inquisitiveness. I mean, I think that's just kind of rephrasing of the same thing. If you're going to be truly empathetic, if you're going to truly understand how other people, how to benefit people who aren't just like you, because that's what an HR person's got to do. You can't be focused on the organization and, oh, what would I do in this instance? That is irrelevant. Okay. It is that knowledge, getting a better knowledge about a lot of different things, in my opinion, so that you can start seeing things through the lens of other people and try to, because that is your job, is to be able to help others to do what they want through their eyes, not yours.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good one. Okay, well, that's it. That's all we have. We made it through our questions. So I'm going to say thank you to everybody who's taken the time to listen. And if you do want to reach out to HR Answers and ask any questions, you can get a hold of us either on our website, which there's an email out there, but the website is www.hranswers.com. That's HR Answers with an S at the end of it. Or you can simply call. The phone still works. I know we spend a lot of time on Zoom these days, but yes, it will ring. I promise. If you dial the number, it's 503-885-9815, and all the extensions are accessible there, but you can also just hit 0 and ask to talk to Eric, and he'll be more than happy to have more conversation with you about organizational alignment. So thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.